Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the viewing and listening audience to this, the 23rd meeting of the Joint Select Committee on Social Services and Public Administration. It is the committee's first public hearing with stakeholders pursuant to its inquiry into the state's response to underperformance in the primary and secondary school and the adequacy of the Student Support Services Division, SSSD, and its impact on the school dropouts at the primary and secondary school levels. Members of the public are invited to submit their comments and questions via the Parliament's social media platforms, including YouTube, ParlView, or Facebook and Twitter. Thank you for joining us, and good morning. At this time, we would like to facilitate the introduction of our members who are here with us. Let me start with Member Mohit.
Good morning to you, Chairman. Good morning to officials from the Ministry of Education. Member Mohit, good to have you. We look forward to a productive session.
Member
Good morning to you, Chairman. Good morning to you, members from the Ministry of Education. Thank you for joining us this morning, and I look forward to a productive session.
Member Nakid.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming in, and looking forward to this, which will be a very trying session.
I don't know about trying, but hopefully productive. Trying. Good morning. I am the committee's chairman, Paul Richards. We'll be joined in process by Member Beckles Robinson. At this time, I'd like to invite members of the Ministry of Education to please introduce themselves, starting with the Acting Permanent Secretary.
Good morning. I am Gwyneth Morris-Alexander, Acting Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education.
The Acting Chief Education Officer.
Hi, good morning. Iran Ramratan, Chief Education Officer, Acting.
The Acting Director of School Supervision.
Good morning. I am Vashti Ramdeen Steele, Acting Director of School Supervision.
The Director of Curriculum Planning and Development Division.
Good morning, everyone. Anna Singh, Director of Division of Curriculum Planning and Development.
The Acting Director of Education Research and Evaluation.
Good morning, everyone. I am Ms. Kamini Bagalu, Acting Director of Educational Research and Evaluation.
And the Manager of Student Support Services Division.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Yinka Carrington. I'm the Manager of Student Support Services.
Thank you all for joining us this morning. The inquiry objectives for this inquiry are as follows. There are four main objectives. One, to assess the current performance levels at key examination checkpoints, including SEA, CSEC, and CAPE. Two, to examine the rates of truancy and school dropouts at the primary and secondary school levels over the past decade. And three, to evaluate the capacity and effectiveness of the Student Support Services Division in providing adequate support and interventions for students, and four, to review and analyze the effectiveness of the current strategies aimed at addressing underperformance, truancy, and school dropouts at the primary and secondary levels. At this point, we'd like to invite Ms. Gwyneth Ann Morris-Alexander, Acting Permanent Secretary, to make brief opening remarks, please.
Good morning once again. Good morning, Chairman, members of the Joint Select Committee on Social Services and Public Administration, and all those present. On behalf of the Ministry of Education, we thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this crucial inquiry into the state's response to underperformance in primary and secondary schools, the adequacy of the Student Support Services Division, and the broader implications for school dropouts. The Ministry is represented here today by a dedicated team of senior officials who bring a wealth of expertise and shared commitment to advancing educational outcomes for all students in Trinidad and Tobago. The Ministry is acutely aware of the challenges impacting our education system, including disparities in school performance, truancy, and dropout rates, and the increasing demand for comprehensive support systems. These challenges, however, are not insurmountable, and we remain committed to addressing them in alignment with the goals of Vision 2030, which envisions a nation built on equity, inclusivity, and a sustainable development. The Ministry's education policy paper focuses on integrating digital transformation and technology-enhanced learning to improve access, equity, and quality in schools. Key initiatives include providing digital devices to students, implementing smart classrooms, and expanding the school learning management system, all aimed at equipping learners with the necessary tools and skills for the digital age. In the context of school and student underperformance, we recognize the need for targeted interventions informed by data and collaboration. The Ministry has implemented several strategies, including remediation programs, the After-School Support Education Program, and Vacation Revision Program are designed to target and address specific academic gaps in response to school and student underperformance. The deployment of support staff, such as learning support assistants, guidance officers, and social workers to schools with the greatest needs, ensuring that both academic and psychosocial challenges are addressed holistically. A shift towards student-centered pedagogies, supported by teacher training and ongoing curriculum reform aimed at fostering critical thinking, creativity, and lifelong learning skills. Further, the Ministry recognizes the importance of addressing the socio-emotional climate within schools. We are intensifying efforts to improve school safety and promote inclusive and supportive environments that enable students to thrive. The Student Support Services Division has also been pivotal in providing much-needed interventions for students at risk of truancy, dropout, and disengagement, from restorative practices that promote conflict resolution and community building to partnerships with NGOs and other stakeholders. The division remains central to creating a supportive safety net for vulnerable students. The Ministry is committed to collaborating with the committee and all stakeholders to ensure every child has the opportunity to succeed regardless of their circumstances. Believing that education is key to national development, the Ministry is ready to present insights, challenges, and solutions during the hearing. We express gratitude to the committee for its ongoing commitment to improving education and look forward to constructive discussions that will help shape a better future for the children of Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you so much. To give us some context, what I'd like to do to start is to identify what the Ministry has defined as student underperformance at the SCA level, the CSEC level, and the CAPE level. So this is some information the Ministry provided to the committee beforehand. At the SCA level, which is a national examination taken by students at the end of their primary education to determine placement in secondary school, student underperformance in SCA is categorized as students' overall score 30% or below in 3 subject areas: English language arts writing, and mathematics. The underperformance definition is students whose overall weighted composite score is 30% and below, considered to be underperforming. It indicates significant challenges in mastering the basic concepts required to progress to secondary school. In terms of CSEC, it is defined by students not attaining a full certificate. A student is considered to be underperforming if they do not attain a full certificate, meaning they fail to achieve passing grades 1 to 3 in 5 subjects, including mandatory subjects, mathematics and English A. It is a key marker of underperformance at the CSEC level in achieving a full certificate, which is essential for further academic or vocational opportunities. So, with that said, let me start by asking a fundamental question. And I know it may be a policy issue, but the definition of underperformance in the context of student placement is stated to be students whose overall weighted composite score is 30% or below. And by my understanding, that is the grade at which a student is deemed adequately prepared, or you can correct me if I'm wrong, to transition to secondary school. Would that be correct?
Yes.
Yes. So in the definition, the 30% or below is considered underperforming, and that indicates significant challenges in mastering basic concepts required for progression to secondary school. In a real sense, is a student getting 31% really considered to have mastered the curriculum and ready for secondary school? This is 30%.
Mr. Chair, 31% or even a little higher than that. What we're looking at the Ministry of Education is the areas of where students' weaknesses would have been identified. So even though it's under 30% that we use as a benchmark, we also cater for students above 30% or under 50%, where we try to provide additional support by having remediation programs for students.
Now, I'm presuming these students who are at the SCA level and attain, let's just say for conversation, 30 to 40%, would have been writing national test, would have been engaged or subject to continuous assessment. Would that be correct?
Yes.
What is the ministry's mechanism for remediating those students who are scoring at that level even before they reach SCA? Because I'm presuming, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, there may not be a precipitous drop in performance at the SCA level if the student is performing adequately before that. But we get through standards 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the student is underperforming or performing at these, what I call pretty low levels, because I'm not of the view that 30% is adequate for transition. It's my view to secondary school, because I think that's still underprepared significantly. What is the mechanism for identifying continuous underperformance in standards 1, 2, 3, and 4, so that we don't have to wait for SCA to tell us that this cadre of students is underperforming?
So, Mr. Chair, in terms of treatment that, the Ministry of Education would look at formative and summative assessments that would be done in relation to the curriculum that would be covered at all levels in the primary school. Based on that, schools do their analysis with regards to looking at weaknesses of students, and that is also built up to the level where if a student has problems and cannot cope with the next level of class level, in terms of moving up like from a standard 1 to a standard 2, they're also given the opportunity to repeat that particular level. That's one. The second thing is that we allow training of teachers to address some of the problems that we identified. We would have reintroduced this is called now the TTNLA, Trinidad and Tobago National Learning Assessment, and that was recently done this year with Standard 1 and Standard 3 students. And from that assessment, we can give and identify areas for providing additional support for students and the training of teachers in remediation, pedagogy, and approaches to treat with students. The primary school students, especially at 3, 4, and 5 standards, 3, 4, and 5, we also have what is called the after-school education support program that happens on afternoon. But we would have identified schools that really needed the most equity in education. So we have 80 schools that focus primary, that this initiative would have started in 2023. 2022 would have started for the secondary schools. We would have started the primary the beginning of 2023. And based on that, additional support, especially in the areas of literacy and numeracy, are provided for students.
If we could look at that a bit in terms of the data, and the remedial education program, according to the Education Ministry, has had a positive impact on SCA performance. There were 80 primary schools on focus. Would that be correct?
Yes.
The mean SCA weighted composite score increased steadily, according to the Ministry, 178.98 in 2022 to 182.33 in 2024. But that is, of course, coming out of COVID and going back to face-to-face classes. Would that not be correct?
Yes, correct.
Right. 26 schools, according to the report, 32.5% showed consistent improvement in scores between 2022 to 2024. 30 schools improved in 2023 compared to 2022, and 13 schools showed further improvement in 2024 compared to 2023. Now, if you look at the raw scores, the raw numbers, if 26 schools out of 80 showed consistent improvement from 22 to 24, That means 54 schools did not. Am I correct?
That's correct.
If 30 schools improved between 2023 compared to 2022, that means 50 schools did not. Correct? And if 13 schools, or 16.3%, showed further improvement in 24 compared to 23, that means 67 schools did not. Is that correct? I'm reading from the ministry's document sent to me.
Yes.
So I'm
Yes.
just inversing the material sent
Yes.
to us. Would that be correct?
Yes.
Unless my math is really off. 13 from 80 is 67. That's correct?
Yes.
So, and the ministry is saying this is showing improvement. So out of 80 schools, with, I do believe, the investment in that was about $10 to $12 million from 22 to 24. Would that be correct? In the remedial program. Correct?
Yes.
The number of schools compared to the overall cadre is quite low, showing improvement. Can you identify the reason for that?
One of the reasons would be that we don't get full participation of students that we are catering for. So that could be a factor into the equation of why we are not seeing the return that we would like based on the efforts that we are making. But at the same time, we want to acknowledge at least we are seeing things moving in a direction, a positive direction that we want to build on, because the under 30%ers would have reduced in 2024, and that is something that, you know, is mentioned here as well.
While it is admirable to look at the successes, we must also look at the gaps, because to me, the vulnerable students who continue to underperform are the ones we need to really focus on. So while I commend the ministry for those who are doing better, there is a significant level of continued underperformance as is identified by this data. Is the ministry looking at re-engineering their strategy? One, to ensure more participation if indeed the issue is a participatory issue, or is it that the strategies being employed or the approaches being taken are not as effective as envisioned? Because as I said before, out of 80 schools, 26 showed improvement between 22 and 24, which means 54 did not. 30 schools showed improvement between 23 and 22, which means 50 did not. And 13 schools showed improvement, which means 67 did not. So what is happening to those 67 schools that did not show improvement? And the students that are in those schools who clearly either didn't participate or didn't benefit from the intervention. That is what my concern is, because those are the ones who are most vulnerable to gangs and going astray.
And your concern is noted, and the Ministry of Education, we will continue to look at this data that we have with regards to what is being done with regards to our program, and where we need to tweak or make adjustments, we will so do, as the case may be. But we are seeing a trend in the positive direction, and we are hoping that next year this would even be better based on what it is that we are continuing to implement from our end. Because we have here 41 schools demonstrated continuous growth in this area as well. So we are seeing signs of improvement, but I hear your point with regards to that, and with regards to our level of implementation of this after-school study program, and where we need to look at some schools where the attendance may not be as high as we would
What's
like.
the participation level generally? Or are they different for different schools? Or there's an overall
The
participation
participation level is approximately 65%.
So that's pretty good.
That's pretty good.
Would you say that's pretty good?
Yes.
Yet, one of the reasons you gave earlier is there may have been an issue with participation.
Yes. Specific schools.
Or specific schools. Final question before I move to Member Mohit. The issue of teacher vacancies, is that an issue?
Teacher vacancies, basically, one of the points we would have included this year, basically, in terms of the timing of appointments. There could be delays, and because of delays, we are saying that could also be a factor that would affect contact teaching time with students.
How much is it a factor? How many vacancies of the full category of teacher positions are there? Can you give us that information?
Sure.
On the national level?
Well, we have approximately 13,500 teachers, primary and secondary school. In terms of primary vacancies that we are currently engaged in filling is 96 in the government primary schools and 44 in the denominational schools. And that is currently being addressed. At the secondary level, we have 293 vacancies. And again, that is currently being addressed because we have two systems that we operate with regards to filling of vacancies. We have a substitute teacher system where if you have interim absence of teachers that principals can access, and also in terms of filling permanent vacancies with regards to subject areas in secondary schools.
Member Mohit.
Just based on your conversation, one question. Based on your conversation with the chairman, what measures have you taken since you addressed participation as a problem? What measures, tangible, have you taken to increase the participation in the schools that are basically at risk?
Yeah. So we would reach out to parents, and this is where our Student Support Services Division would play a key role. Have parental counseling, reach out to parents with regards to their children's education and building that interest, providing that support for their academic growth and the importance of their involvement, and where needs be having home visits done as well by our school social workers to really get to know what is happening at the home level and what support base would be needed there to help parents get their students, or get their children on board with regards to the programs that we are offering.
And if you all assess that it's poverty, that they don't have the financial means, do you all address that?
Yes, as best as we can in terms of providing support, school meals. That's one avenue to ensure that students are on the list to receive school meals, transportation, to ensure that students can benefit from the social development programs as well, where parents could access funding. We have recently launched our school grant that we got distributions, almost 20,000 beneficiaries we had recently, and we are also looking at preparing for next year disbursement as well. So all of these avenues we would tap into to assist parents and to get their children to school.
Thank you, Member Mohit. Thanks, Member Nakit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Mr. Ramratan, on page 5 of your submission, as we were just discussing, it mentions 80 underperforming primary schools identified through the SEA results. You have your educational districts. Can you state for us which of these education districts have the highest number of these underperforming schools?
Yes, that would be at the primary level.
Primary level.
Yes, Northeastern District and Port of Spain as well.
Sure. Just one supplemental. You would have mentioned participation. You mentioned you are working through the social services officers to visit the homes, etc. What have you so far identified as the main reason for non-participation?
Can I pass on that to our Student Support Services Division Manager, Dr. Inka? Carrington.
Good morning once again, Chair, through the Chair.
Good morning.
Our Student Support Services Division officers, and I'm going to speak to the school social workers at this time, they work through referrals. So once a student has been referred, for example, we don't see the student in school for a number of days, and that student has been absent due to poverty or whatever. Those students are referred, the officers would go to the homes and they would start the process. So there are a number of issues that may account for students not being at school. And some of the issues that were revealed to the officers were things like the health challenges of students or even health challenges of their caretakers. We also saw that some family factors can come into play. We saw community factors. So for example, students coming from what we would call under-resourced communities with gang influences and heavy violence, they may stay away sometimes. We also captured the socio-economic factors, unemployment of the parent, unable to send them to school, and this is where we have the collaboration with the Ministry of Social Development, where we give information and provide information to parents about the different grants available to assist students. We even have some of our students' parents just homeschooling. So there are multiple factors, and then different communities throughout the 7 districts, you may get at different times. For example, livelihood may be a factor where students are not going to come to school. So if the school is based in like a fishing village, parents would keep their children home so that they can help with the livelihood. So we have uncovered a number of factors why students are not in the schools to get what we need to have them get. Thank you.
Is the remedial program the summer-based program, the vacation period program?
It's, well, it's two different, both are remediation programs, but the one for the July-August period is what we call the vacation revision program. The one that is happening during the term at the primary level is the after-school support education program. That's for the 80 schools of focus primary.
And that's the one where there may be some participation issues.
Yes.
And that's after school, suggesting that, well, unless parents can put systems in place to accommodate for that, there'll be challenges.
That's right. And
what time does that go from?
Right. That goes from 3:15 to 4:30. And we also have a flexibility where some schools, based on the situation of students, that they can have it early in the morning as well. Some schools would have asked for that because it is very difficult for students after the 3 p.m. to stay back because of transportation issues and so on.
No, but Mr. Chairman, Mr. Amratan, earlier in this meeting, you just indicated that you work with the students, you work with the parents, and you provide transportation, etc. So, and you do referrals to social development and so on. So the transportation in which you are providing, is it not related to these programs specifically? If it goes after 3, you have special arrangements?
That will be an issue based on some of the areas where we depend on PTSE and maxi taxi concessionaires through PTSE for our transportation service. And in some areas, it may be difficult to acquire a concessionaire based on the route. So we may have some challenges with that in getting concessionaires for some of these particular areas.
So the transportation in which you are referring to has to do with them attending school. That's the 8 to 3 period.
Yeah, and, yes, and more so if we are catering for this class time, this after-school program, for students to stay back, in some cases, it would be a challenge because if they don't get certain transportation at that hour when school dismisses and they have to stay back, it will be difficult to reach home. But that is not the majority of cases, but we do have some situations like that, and that is where some schools would have asked for that flexible timing where they're asked to have it in the morning time, and we allow them to do it as well.
Thank you. Just to give a whole picture, I don't want to leave out some information. On the positive side, the percentage of students scoring above 50% in SCA increased by 20% between 2023 and 2024, with 41 schools or 51.25 demonstrating consistent improvement in that area. I didn't want to leave out that information to paint a holistic picture. You're smiling, so I didn't want to give an unbalanced report. Member Monroe?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chairman. Question to the team from Ministry of Education. Your submission stated that a feature of the Re-Engaging for Success initiative was of mentorship and coaching. I would like to know this morning, can the ministry further elaborate on the mentorship and coaching initiative? Also, how many mentors and coaches are currently enrolled in this program?
Chair, good morning. So the mentorship program is coordinated through a national thrust. Our corporate communications unit would liaise, and we've had calls for mentors. Currently, to my recall, we have 61 mentors deployed. So mentors, there's a call. They are invited. They are provided preliminary training, orientation, and matched to a school where their particular talents and competencies would serve well to the needs of the students at that school.
Also, I'd like to find out, were there any challenges in recruitment or enrollment of mentors, and how were they properly matched to the students?
Okay, so there are challenges because our mentorship program relies on goodwill. And with that in mind, some interested persons were not able to sustain their involvement. The match would look at things like the mentors' community involvement, and if that matches with the community of the schools, the mentors' talents, their interest area, even their careers, in terms of whether they can provide counseling, whether they, through their talent area, can leverage on that to provide support to students based on their interests. Okay. We also have partnered with Ministry of Sport and Community Development. They do a campaign with mentors, and so they work with us as well in terms of their sport icon program. So we operate through that, that pool of mentorship which derives from the interests and the particular areas where we can identify exemplars.
Chair, can I just add something more to that? Okay, so with regards to mentoring and volunteerism that was just mentioned, with regards to the 26 secondary schools of focus, you asked about numbers. So we have approximately 71 mentors that would have volunteered to do services to our schools. We have about 34 who are currently active and engaging students in both motivational and career avenues that they can look into. So that, that is happening, and we are looking at the rest of the schools that within the 26 where some mentors haven't started, but they are being contacted for continuing their services to these schools and providing this kind of support to students.
So you're saying out of the 71, 34 are active. How often do these mentors meet with their mentees?
At least twice a week. Some of them would visit schools twice a week.
Okay, and I would like to find out overall the initiative Engaging Success. What is the ministry's views as to the success of this initiative thus far?
Engaging in success is one of the strategic goals of the Ministry of Education, and it's not just with the mentorship program alone. It is a series of things that we are doing simultaneously. So the remediation program together with the mentorship program, providing learning support assistance to the same schools of focus, and things like that that we are doing. So it is a combination of these things to help students reach a higher rate of success than where they are currently, based on their weaknesses or their areas that they need to concentrate some more on, that we are providing at the Ministry of Education through these initiatives and programs.
Last question, the outstanding mentors that are still to come on to the program, how soon do you expect them to come on board?
We are hoping this term is almost to an end. Just about next week will be the close of the school term. So we are hoping within the start of the term 2 that we can have the full complement of mentors. They would have, for whatever reason, some of them could not start this term, but they would have still made a commitment to the Ministry of Education to continue because they saw the importance of the need in these particular schools. And I'm sure they're also enjoying these engagements with the students as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
First of all, we commend those mentors, but this concept of goodwill in these times, I'm having a little problem with that. If you could explain that a little bit to me. I know it's voluntarism, but the concept of goodwill,
If I may, Chair. We have, the ministry has embarked on an approach to curriculum reform and through re-engagement for success using our cultural transformation policy, which is really rooted in a focus on values, attitudes, and behaviors. And in that process, we are looking at engaging students to improve their entrepreneurial skills, their talents, and so on. But one of the things we also know is that we would like for them to give back and to get engaged in the community that they live in, whether at the school community, the immediate community, volunteerism, service learning, all that is part of cultural transformation. And therefore, we don't have a difficulty with our mentors being willing to exemplify that level of service learning, volunteerism that we want our students to also emulate. So I do understand that we should not necessarily go the route of goodwill to the extent of advantage, but this is not what we are looking for. We are looking for exemplars that show to our students that they can give back. And it is not unique. We have schools where the alumni, the PTA, they continue, members of the community continue to invest in schools. And that investment is not necessarily cash. It may be kind. And all of those engagements provide role models, provide opportunities broader than what the ministry can possibly do if we were to attempt to deploy our limited resources. So I understand the concern, but I do believe, and we do believe there's a wealth of benefit to facilitate that kind of interaction.
Well, there's no doubt there will be a lot of good people on board. Growing up, all of us here, I'm sure, had mentors. No doubt. But the fact of the matter is we have 34 functioning mentors out of 70, 71?
Yeah, yes, yeah.
Right, and you stated that there was some synergy with the Ministry of Sport and Community Development. So is it not possible, in order to increase the functionality, that there's some kind of stipend given to those mentors? I understand your point about cultural transformation and all of that. But the fact of the matter is all these alumni associations that we speak about, they happen in functioning schools, schools that do better. Here we are focusing on the schools that you have in focus, meaning they're not doing well because their parents probably working 2 or 3 jobs a day. So what are we going to do to increase the mentorship there in those schools so we have people going in there? And just as supplemental to that, how many schools, or students do these 34 mentors cover?
The schools of focus in particular, that's the 26 schools of focus, secondary schools.
20?
26 schools.
26, 34 mentors?
Yeah. And, 34 that currently doing sessions with students. It's not that we don't have more, but they are not engaged at the moment. But I also want to make the point that the Ministry of Education, we have what is called the school-based management model, and that is based on dimensions. And one of the important dimensions there is stakeholder relationship. So in building stakeholder relationship, we also allow persons who would like to approach schools and support schools. So even though we are talking about these 26 schools, it doesn't mean that other schools don't benefit from that kind of support and that kind of initiative where people are willing to come in and speak to students, motivational talks, or even certain career path where we have people who have established themselves within this country, national as that is, who would want to engage students, who would have that kind of interest. We also have what is called the Adopt a School initiative, where beyond just mentors, but you can also have companies, private companies or NGOs or individuals willing to provide financial support. You are talking about a stipend, but they want to provide financial support or assist schools in building certain aspects of their curriculum delivery, whether it is ICT or library, agricultural science, and so on. And that was launched in February this year, and we have about 60 projects where private companies, NGOs, and individuals would have pledged support to certain initiatives in schools.
Mr. Hamilton, I understand all of that. What I'm saying is, especially in the at-risk areas, and I've been to them. As a matter of fact, I grew up in a couple of them, Picton for one and Mongdor for the second. What I'm saying is that to get people to actually work in those areas, to do that mentorship you're talking about, it's not going to be easy because they have their own needs, challenges economically. I'm trying to say, can there be some engagement at a level where people actually get paid so they're accountable for what they're doing to the kids? At the end of the day, is what are we doing to improve all these programs that sound nice, Adopt a School and all that. What are we doing to make sure that it functions within the system?
Yeah, well, your point is taken in terms of the ministry can look into that avenue. I cannot make a commitment at this point in time, but I take your point.
Okay, and one supplemental, we had, what is the criteria for getting these mentors? What are the qualifications for engaging a mentor, other than obviously their willingness? Well, are there any academic qualifications, psychological?
Well, their background is very important with
right.
regards to the particular individual, and having a certificate of good character, that is also requested as well. So before we allow them to engage in the students, there must be some level of acceptance where we look at certain things. Yeah.
So how do you go about that recruitment? Do you just put out an ad and whoever comes in? Or do you actively go, for example, we have a lot of ex-players, sportsmen, athletes, who can give back. Do you go actively recruiting those people?
This is done through our corporate communications unit, and they would do the necessary advertisements or make the requests or reach out to certain persons or people who are sure have that interest and treat with processing those persons to see whether or not they are suitable candidates for the mentorship program.
Who vets them?
Persons within the Ministry of Education, once certain information is provided for us to look at.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on. I wanted to get a sense, because you mentioned upon a question by Member Monroe, that there were 3 districts that were seen to be underperforming. And could you restate those to me, please?
Yes, Port of Spain and Northeastern, where we have the larger number of schools of focus. Yeah.
Port of Spain, Northeastern alone. Well, I looked back at some data last year, and there was also a school. Sorry?
Southeastern District.
And the Southeastern District, because I was going to add that from the data I saw in the Southeastern District. And these districts, from the data I saw, a snapshot was on the ministry's data website, have showed consistent underperformance over the last 5 to 7 years. This underperformance even predates COVID. Am I correct?
Yes, you are correct.
So COVID would not be the cause of it. COVID would have exacerbated the performance issue to those schools. Had there been a particular focus on those districts, I should say, not schools, in the past, and if so, why do these districts continue to underperform? And I know there are social issues, et cetera, but if we are not seeing improvement, it means we may not be having proper diagnostic tools, we may not be putting the level of resources, more resources in these areas, et cetera. Are you pumping more resources into these school districts? Because they're the ones that clearly are in need of the most intervention because of their consistent underperformance for almost a decade.
The schools of focus would have been the ones identified, and they would have been in these respective districts. So when we look at schools of focus, we look at it in terms of national with regards to all education districts. And some that would have shown where the need would be greater, more schools would have showed up. And that's where you have those numbers there. The initiatives that we are using and what we are doing are broad-based for all these schools. But it's not limited to just these schools. We do have at the district level what you call the district leadership team. And the district leadership team not only treats with the implementation of these initiatives to the 80 primary schools and 26 secondary schools of focus, but also look at other schools that are in need of visitation and providing support because the leadership, district leadership team really consists of the curriculum division, school supervisors, and of course, student support services division. So collectively, they would meet once a week. They would discuss some of these issues affecting students' performance. That is a big thing. And they would plan visits. Some would be team visits to these schools where they would meet with the principal and teachers and really do a more in-depth diagnostic of what's happening at the school level. In the case of a primary school, at each class level, and assist teachers where they would identify certain issues with regards to curriculum implementation and where certain monitoring and support would be required. And these things have been happening for some time now. I know the performance don't reflect it, but from the ministry's end, these are the things that we do.
But isn't that the key performance indicator, though?
Yeah.
Improvement. So while you give me all the wonderful technical jargon and the protocols that are established on international benchmarks and the information about the resources being pumped in the diagnostics, at the end of the day, for many, many years, these districts continue to underperform. And in my training, my understanding is that if particular school districts continue to underperform, it's not necessarily the students. It's systemic. It's systemic, pointing to either the schools themselves and the leadership in the schools, or it is a systemic issue that's putting these students at a significant disadvantage, because you're not telling me 7 years or so means generations of students are passing through these districts and underperforming. That is systemic. That is not the students' fault. That is the system failing the students. And to say that we are continuing to intervene and we have hope for the future is really an abdication of our duty to ensure that these programs are succeeding. Because at the end of the day, those are minors, they're children, and they're depending on us as the administrators and the leaders in various sectors to do them right. So you're not telling me that a student goes from primary to secondary school and generations are continuing to fail. And I'm not putting this on you, I'm saying it is systemic. And we cannot just sit by comfortably and continue to accept 7 years, 10 years, whole school districts, the same 3 school districts primarily, continuing to fail. What is the ministry doing to change these trends? It's almost like everybody's in a comfort zone where these things are concerned.
Yeah. I hear your point on that. And from the ministry's end, we continue to look at it. We are not comfortable with those levels of performance of students. So from our end, we continue to go deeper into our interventions and in terms of training of teachers with regards to remediation, because remediation at some school levels, we may have to go a little deeper, and we may have to do sessions with teachers more specific to certain things that when we look at our visits, certain things would be identified. If it's shortcomings with teachers with regards to their lesson preparation.
Sorry to interrupt you. You know what's amazing to me about this when I looked at the data scan on the ministry's website? These are all government schools. Am I wrong? These are all government administrative schools. They're not denominational schools, which means the government has full remit over these schools. It's not a school where you have to go through a denominational board to try to make an intervention. These are completely under the remit of the government of Trinidad and Tobago and the Ministry of Education. So it's an indictment on the ministry that these areas, these districts, continue to consistently underperform.
Okay. Okay, good morning. So the ministry has recognized that we have been focusing a lot on academic achievement, and recently what we have conducted in all of our schools in 2024, and even prior to 2024, we would have had pilot introductions of what we call the school climate survey. And the reason why we have actually introduced the school climate survey is that the ministry has recognized that the provision of a safe, secure, and conducive learning environment is an essential objective for our schools to actually improve. So to this end, we have conducted the school climate surveys in all of our primary and secondary schools. In the primary, we have conducted it at levels 1 and 3, standards 1 and 3, and then we would have conducted it as well at the secondary level at the forms 1 and 3.
Thank you. Could you give me a sense, and I know it may be difficult because we didn't ask for the information before, about the number of students, the raw scores, scoring under 30% in 2024 SCA, out of the roughly 18,000 students that write the SCA every year?
Nationally in 2024, we would have 2,711.
2,711 students. That's a lot of students. The noticeable, according to the ministry, there was a statement you gave us that a noticeable increase in the proportion of students scoring below 30% in English language arts writing, and that decline was most pronounced in the non-fiction text, fiction text, and poetry stands, which had significantly lower mean scores. And the ministry has provided targeted support for teachers, focusing on the areas of reading comprehension, which included training sessions, followed by district school-based monitoring. The implication I have from this is that this is a change in trend. Would that be correct? Which had not been evident before.
Yes.
Has there been an analysis as to why this change in trend, where English language arts writing had the decline of students scoring below 30%? And was it concentrated in any particular school district, or was it across the board?
I think it was, from our analysis, it was across the board. English language normally this be in the range of 60% in terms of students' performance, and it fell this year. And we would have looked at poetry and graphic, as you would identify there in our submission, as being the key area or the key strands where that would have, students would have dropped in performance. We're looking at, based on this and based on what's happened here, we are looking at the language arts curriculum, and in terms of the primary school, looking at it from standard 3, 4, and 5 in terms of retraining of teachers from next term, specifically to these strands, and others where we see students' performance would have been weak, And not only there, but also in mathematics, where certain strands as well would have showed up. So it's a combination of both the language arts and the mathematics to provide that kind of support to teachers to ensure that come around in the next year SEA exam, our students will have a better opportunity of, improving on that performance.
Mohit.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. To the officials, the ministry, in your submission, it makes mention that a key initiative to address performance challenges in SEA subjects is a diagnosis and remediation training for teachers of Standard 3, 4, and 5 scheduled for terms 2 and 3 of the 2024-2025 academic year. For the purposes of this committee and the population, can you elaborate on the diagnosis aspect of this initiative?
Okay, Chair. Through Chair, in 2023, Ministry of Education recruited a team from the UTT to train selected the teachers of the schools of focus in remediation training. And out of that training, the resources created were manuals. These manuals we have now circulated. But what we are doing in the year to come, and we've already started as well working on, would be to roll out that training to all schools. So it isn't an initiative that is just starting in the next term, but we did it in a pilot way to those focus schools, and that training was actually done by the UTT. What we are doing now is providing the opportunity for all other schools to benefit from that training by sensitizing them in the use of the manual, the resource that was generated going forward. Now, in terms of diagnosis, what we realize is that for planning of instruction and even in terms of selecting the best strategies for teaching and for assessment, we realize that teachers are not making best use of data that they collect, whether it is a class test, a weekly test, a termly test. They are not using it for the purpose, effectively for the purpose of diagnostic in terms of identifying where there are concepts or gaps, or in terms of significant areas where the foundations that students need was not properly done. So what we are doing is we are training the teachers to use their data sources and to even create tests, or what you would say assessments, so that they can pinpoint for their students the areas of weaknesses and be able to do proper item analysis and use that to inform their planning and their actual delivery of instruction. And that is not just at the primary, that is also at the secondary level. What we have now, having done the investment with UTT, is a resource that we can refer them to that supports what we speak to them when we visit and when we examine their documents and we observe what they are doing in the classroom. We are now able to see that here is a resource, and we direct them to it with exemplars. We also, on our website, would have created what we call the optimal learning guidelines, where for every subject at every level, we guided teachers on how to do diagnosis. So we are realizing it's similar to what any doctor will do. You have to have information that you leverage on in order to provide the best opportunities for students to learn, and we are guiding our teachers how to make use of the data that they already generate. And if necessary, and they have to intervene or they have to deepen their interrogation, how they can do that.
But how is this involving the Student Support Services Division? Because
So
this sounds
this-
very similar to what the Student Support Services Division would do.
So this would be the, working in tandem with what Student Support Services Division, and they, I will refer to Dr. Carrington, Nurse Carrington, who will elaborate in their approaches as well in terms of their referral system and also what their guidance unit does.
Chair, if you may. The Student Support Services Division comprises of 5 main units. And our guidance and counseling unit is charged with that preventative program for students. And they also provide information for parents. So under the banner of guidance and counseling, we look at personal social development, academic development, and career development pathways. So those are some of the things under that. We would be doing what we call group guidance sessions with students under the area of study skills, the importance of education, value in self, self-concepts, occupational awareness, and we will also pass on the same or similar information to our teachers and our parents. We work in tandem with school supervision where we understand and meet the students at their need, and different schools are treated, I don't want to say differently, but we have different populations to work with.
Just before Member Mohit continues, the Student Support Services Division conceptually is an excellent idea in the Ministry of Education. It clearly, and the role has clearly, over the years, because of the challenges being faced by the student population, a lot more demands are being placed on SSSD. Would that not be correct? It would have started off with behavioral emotional intervention, but now it's transitioning to, or has transitioned to, educational intervention. Would that be correct?
That is correct.
How, and over the years, I know a lot of people in student support services, I'll call no names, who have consistently lamented the lack of resources, the lack of staff, and with the increased load and demand, a lack of a commensurate increase in investment in student support services by the Ministry of Education. Am I off key in this assessment?
The Student Support Services Division has indeed grown. And over the years, because of the fluidity of the education system and of our communities, our challenges are, we are varied from the educational, as you stated, straight into the psychosocial, psychoeducational.
Do you have the resources you need?
We are getting there. We don't have all the resources that we need.
Let's quantify. How many positions are on the structure in the student support services? And how many are filled?
So currently we have 681 positions filled in student support services with 361 vacancies.
361 vacancies.
Yes.
This doesn't sound, from the last time we had an interface with the Education Ministry, that it's heading in the right direction in terms of filling of vacancies. Are you having challenges filling vacancies? And do you have a high attrition rate?
We do, I wouldn't say we have a high attrition rate, but circumstances change and persons would move on. But we are currently, we have recruited over the last 2 months some different positions from different divisions, and we are going to be recruiting again in the months of January and February to fill some of the major positions that we have outstanding.
And what impact is this having on your operation? Because from what you've said, it seems there are 900 positions with 600 filled, is that it? And 300 outstanding? That's what I heard. I could have been wrong.
We have 681 positions filled, and yes, 361 outstanding.
So about 1,000
yes.
positions
yes.
in all. So you roughly have 2/3 filled and 1/3 outstanding. To me, that in any organization is significant.
It is.
So that must be having a significant negative impact, particularly given the increasing load and demands on the student support services, not only academic intervention, but emotional behavioral intervention, which is also increasing in terms of students who have emotional behavioral problems, including suicidal ideation. Would that be correct?
To an extent, that would be correct.
You have these politically correct answers. I'm giving you major props. Member Morit, go ahead, please.
With the greatest respect to you, the officials, I have spoken to quite a few persons who work with this particular division. And one of the complaints, frequent complaints that you would get from them is that they are overworked. And it's a lot of cases, and it's very difficult for them to have success stories at a quick pace. So would you say that you have sufficient personnel in terms of your schools of focus at this point to get the results that you want, given that you have participation challenges?
Chair, if you may. So at our schools of focus, we have in the 80 schools of focus, and then in the 26 secondary schools, we have what we call dedicated officers. So I will give an example. In our secondary schools, we have a guidance officer, a school social worker, and in some of the schools where they may have if the population is higher than normal, we would have to put at least 2 or 3 other officers there to support those. In the primary schools of focus, we have 1 officer to 2 schools. We don't want to make it bigger than that because of the number of cases that can come through. Some cases are higher than others depending on the district. So in the schools of focus, I believe that we have sufficient persons to address the needs coming out of the schools of focus, and we add staff depending on the size of the population and caseload coming out of that particular school.
And outside of the schools of focus, you have issues elsewhere as well, which you would know. What's happening there? Because in some instances, I have had a particular case in one of my schools, and they have never had a member of the Student Support Services Division ever assigned to their school. So what's the case with other schools outside of the schools of focus?
Okay. Chair, if you may. Outside of the schools of focus, our officers will work in clusters. So they may have something like 3 to 4 schools per cluster that they try to attend the cases. If there is a crisis, we have a crisis team that will respond to the schools. So they wouldn't have a dedicated person, but we will ensure that an officer visits the school and liaises with the, what we would call the DLT and the supervision department in the district. If there is a need, we also provide that immediate need for those schools.
Thank you. Just before I go to Member Monroe, if my memory serves me correctly, I looked and scanning the budget documents, would there have been a reduction in the allocation to SSSD in the last 2 years, only re-increasing in this year? Had your allocations in the budget been decreased in the last couple of years at all? I don't know if the Chief Education Officer can answer that.
I don't think the allocation has been reduced for SSSD, but we will double check it as to check it. Yeah. Can't confirm at this time.
I think one of the reasons, because it came up in a question in the lower house, and the response was that a lot of the funding was diverted to the intervention services. I could stand corrected, but it had been re-increased. So I'm just wondering given the increased load and the demand and the need for more staff to fill the 300 positions,
right,
if the allocation had been commensurate with that.
Well, we are in the process of treating with the vacancies that are that currently exists in SSSD. So in order to do that, we would also ensure that the funds that we need to have these additional recruitments done available.
My response to that predates you. It doesn't reflect on you, but we've heard that before in the last couple of years, over and over and over. So it doesn't give me a lot of comfort to hear that, quite frankly. Member Monroe?
Thank you very much, Chairman. Question to the panel. Your submission stated several strategies to support students entering secondary school with a SEA score 30% or below. Initiatives such as a 5-week vacation review program, curriculum delivery support, enhancing school performance initiative, alternative pathways, psychosocial support, and learning assistant. I would like to find out, for the purpose of the general public and this committee, is this program mandatory to all students that score 30% and below? And what are the sizes of these classes?
It's available to all students assigned to these 26 schools of focus, secondary schools. So all students, when they start Form 1, they are catered for, even prior to when they pass SEA, the July-August vacation, as you said earlier, the VRP, it starts there and continues. The class sizes vary from school to school. Well, not vary, the number of under 30%ers assigned will not be the same for every school, but it does not affect the class size, which is roughly approximately 30 to 35 students per class at the Form 1 level.
Okay, just for clarity, you said that it is available, but is it mandatory that they have to participate?
You're talking specifically to the VRP?
Yes.
Yeah. It is not mandatory, but it is the ministry's intention that all parents would seize that opportunity for their students to participate in this VRP. It augurs well for when they start the new academic year, that they will be in a better position covering this program to really get into their Form 1 level of work, where we have an adapted curriculum specifically designed for these students to follow, where additional support in literacy and numeracy in terms of periods are provided to give them that level of reinforcement and support.
Follow-up question. What if the parent fail to ensure that the child participates and the student then is now left vulnerable to prolong the problem of being 30% or below, not being able to even catch up with those that would have participated in that available programs that were made for them?
Yeah. Well, unlike the primary, we don't have an afternoon class for secondary, but it is hoped within the start of the school year, when pre-tests would be done on all students, that teachers will be able to see students' areas of weaknesses and be able to support and provide additional support to these students who did not participate in the VRP. So they are still catered for within the Form 1 level and moving on, because the adapted curriculum goes from Form 1 to Form 2, and it's also an opportunity to prepare them for what is called the lower secondary proficiency certificate. So that is something as well that we try to ensure that students will be able to have some level of certification at that level, because some of them may exit the school system before they reach CSEC.
Thank you. Follow-up question. I would also like to find out the psychosocial support for students. Were there any challenges for students to access the program? And if you could also state how many students would have been able to access that program?
Chair, if you may. Our social support is accessed by students who are referred to our program. So we deal with students who are referred to SSSD. Once referred, our teams would meet and they would assign the case to the particular unit. So in terms of a challenge to the referred student to get the support, no, we don't have that challenge because we have a process that we follow. Sometimes the challenge can be when we have to go, when the case is allocated to the different unit, we may have challenges sometimes with the parent being able to come to provide the different information, or we may have challenges with documentation. We may even have challenges with students wanting to open up. So that is where the challenges would come. But in the case of once a student is referred to SSSD, it goes through a process where the case is assessed, and then that case is sent to the necessary unit to provide the different support system.
Thank you. Final question. Yeah. My final question on this topic. Is there a system in place by the ministry to measure after the 5 weeks program students' performance, if it has increased or not? And if the student performance has not increased, what is in place by the ministry as to what would happen with the student and how they would move forward?
Okay, so just one correction. When we were talking about class sizes just now, I was thinking about the normal Form 1 level. The VRP would be approximately 20 students to one tutor to cater for that small class size. So pre and post tests would be done. When the VRP starts, you would do a pre-test, and that pre-test would give some idea as to exactly the areas to focus or concentrate more on with regards to students' literacy and numeracy levels. And then at the end of the program, we do a post-test. However, the post-test we had in 2022, there was an improvement when we did that pre and post test. It may not have been at the level we would anticipate it to be, but we saw improvement. I think it was about between 3 and 4% was that improvement. But the majority of students continue to move on. Remediation continues at the school level, whichever school they are, these 26 schools of focus, and specifically in the areas of literacy and numeracy, for them to build on their skills that they need. What is also offered is also to encourage them to get involved into VAPA, visual and performing arts, and other areas that would help and add and complement and support a kind of integrated approach with regards to curriculum delivery and helping students to actually build on some of their areas of interest that would help them to grow in these critical subject areas. Well, the core subject areas, I should say, of maths and language arts.
Just before I go to Member Naked, may I suggest, I have a colleague who has done some research in the UK regarding this same issue of language arts and the reduction or the reduction in the performance levels of language arts. And the research that he and his colleagues were able to do focused on two main areas. One, students who generally don't speak formal English and had to code switch, and its impact on their language arts and their ability to write and comprehensively. And two, interestingly enough, the pervasive increased use of digital technologies and social media and the impact of that on their performance in language arts in particular. So I don't know if you want to explore that also to see if that's having an effect in Trinidad and Tobago, because the issue is not exclusive to Trinidad and Tobago. All right, Member Naked.
Thank you, Chair. You had, in 11 of your 26 schools of focus, a restorative practitioner program was piloted. How's that going? And give us some preliminary outcomes of that pilot test.
Sorry, through the chair. The restorative practices program is brand new. It started in October 2023. So what we gathered was some mostly along the lines of anecdotal data that we're going to be using as the baseline data moving forward. The program has had positives and, I don't want to say negatives, but it's teething, through teething processes, challenges. Thank you very much. We've had some challenges.
Sorry to interrupt you, but just for the purpose of the listening audience and who's watching, what was the objective of the program?
Right. So the objective of the program was to assist in creating supportive school communities, building the focus on strong relationships, reducing and managing conflict, and helping students to stay engaged and restore that type of conflict constructively. Because we understood that there was a point in time where students were not managing their conflict, not managing themselves, and they recognized that the pain that was happening in the school was also coming from outside of the school. So this is why we had to get a program that worked within and outside of the school. So it's also strong on building that community engagement.
Preliminary outcomes?
Preliminary, yes. We have seen some fluctuations in terms of, for example, suspensions in the schools of focus. We've had some reductions in the suspensions. That is one of the main areas in the restorative program, to look at a reduction in suspensions and even look at some alternative pathways to suspension. We have seen that through our restorative dialogue, help through our morning and afternoon circle sessions with our students, and the teachers conduct those sessions. We have seen students voice how they feel about different things. We have seen students even going to talk to restorative practitioner, saying that I feel like if I'm going to fight, or I feel disrespected. So they're understanding that their feelings are validated. We have also seen through our harm circles and reintegration circles, those are circles that when a student is suspended or has been away from school for a while, when they're coming back into the community, we have a circle with them to help them to reassimilate and understand their purpose and their goals once more. And we have also done some preliminary projects with them to understand things like restore the peace in communities that we call the unresourced or the difficult communities, so that we get community partnership and buy-in with the program. So initially the program is working well. We have had some good support with the program, but we also have some challenges with the program because not everybody wants to buy in into a new program. You know, that is the problem with the buy-in. We also have, in terms of our challenges, we will, it's out there, the resources. We need certain tools, and we have some, but yes.
Given the rise in the violence, school violence, all of that, we know. You're saying we have problems with the buy-in from the students, from the administrators? Who exactly? I don't understand. Be specific.
With any new program, you will get buy-in challenges from administration. You may get buy-in challenges from students. You may get buy-in challenges from parents, because this is a program based on trust.
Just a follow-up question to that. It's piloted in 11 of 26 schools of focus.
Correct.
Those 11 schools, are they among the schools with the highest level of violence in Trinidad and Tobago? Or was it just randomly picked?
Through the chair, the committee looked at the suspension data, and from that, they ascertained which schools within the different 7 educational districts was going to be eligible for this particular program to run as the pilot.
And what districts did those fall in?
All seven educational districts, we have schools. Some schools may have more than one, some districts may have more than one school.
And just to intervene, could you give us a sense, because I'm presuming if it's a restorative approach to deal with conflict resolution and emotional behavioral issues, that there would have been probes used to debrief the students who were part of this, could you give us a sense of what the sources of the issues with the students generally? Were you able to get that kind of anecdotal or empirical information?
When we look at engaging in the students, initially we recognized that communication was a very big issue. How we communicate with students and then how students communicate with us. And that was one of the main issues in terms of some of the challenges within the program. We also looked at issues with community-based issues. Some students come from communities plagued with violence, and they bring that type of issue into the school. So that, initially, that's one of the other issues we are seeing there. We're also looking at behavior, student behavior, repeated infractions, and students not recognizing that the repeated behavior is not giving a different result. So we had to help students understand that when you do this, it causes harm, it causes pain, it affects not only you and the person you have the infraction with, but it affects a wider range. And demonstrating and showing that to students, we have seen some slow-paced results, yes, in students understanding and trying to, say, self-check before they do something.
Much focus was placed on bullying.
So bullying is a part of the system. We are seeing it. And once we see a case of bullying, or once a case of bullying is referred, we have a process to address bullying. So bullying is not only addressed by our RPs or restorative practitioners, but we also have, again, our school social workers that will do targeted interventions for bullying through either group sessions, small group sessions, or individual counseling.
Sorry to interrupt. How much is this enforced? I mean, issue of bullying has made it onto mainstream media in the last couple of weeks. And it's not new. It's a repeating issue. It seems to be intensifying based on anecdotal reports. But along the reports that you get, when it unfortunately gets to the stage of a front page, the information leading up to that would suggest that it had been reported and not been dealt with effectively at the school level. What's the process, the official process, for a student reporting that he or she is being bullied? And how stringently is this enforced by the Education Ministry?
Chair, if I may. So, whereas we have such incidents, students who would claim to be victims of a bullying incident, they would report it to their class teacher or form teacher, or they may report it to the dean of discipline in case of a secondary school. It is investigated. A preliminary investigation is done with regards to the incident, and certain actions are taken in terms of investigating to find out exactly the nature of the incident and to address it. It would be addressed at that level. In the school, if needs be, we may also have a conference with the parent or parents, as the case may be, depending on how it unfolds based on the preliminary investigation, and it is taken from that point. If based on the nature of the bullying incident and the student who is the victim, there will also be the need for doing a referral, and that referral is done from the school to Student Support Services Division, who can follow up and treat with the particular incident and helping the student to cope with whatever negative experience based on the bullying.
And if the response is not satisfactory to the parent or guardian or caregiver, what are the avenues of recourse for that parent or caregiver? And then Member Naki, you can go ahead, please.
Yeah, well, sometimes the parent, if not satisfied at the school level, may approach the school supervisor in the education district, and then it can lead to a further investigation of the incident and to follow up with regards to whatever treatment is needed to help the student and to provide some way of resolving the issue, whatever was that remain unresolved, and moving forward. So the key thing there is that communication and continuing to treat with it as the case may be, a case-by-case basis, and to ensure that the parent would be satisfied that the particular matter is properly resolved.
Based on what you just said, how many cases of bullying has been referred?
Yeah.
Let's get some raw data.
Yes, we have data that we would have gathered from our primary and secondary schools from 2022 to present, and the numbers that would have been reported where suspensions would have been done based on investigations at the school level that would have been done and conducted. Primary school, the total is 77. In secondary, it is 470. But it's on a decline with regards to when we look at it over that period as well. Now, even though this is happening, and because of certain cases coming forward, that with its social media, the Ministry of Education, we are very concerned about every single incident. And sometimes it's unfortunate that it hits social media before the school actually get a chance to address it properly. Or while it's being addressed, sometimes simultaneously, it will be put on social media and it is, it goes viral. But it doesn't mean that it is not being addressed or we are not treating it seriously at the Ministry of Education.
Understandable, but you say 77, then you graduate secondary school to 470, which we know a lot of bullying cases are underreported as well.
That's right.
What is the ministry doing to address that staggering rise from 77 to 470? Is there any, have more social services been offered, officers being allocated to schools, especially where the rise is occurring?
Well, at the school level, we have what is called student councils to get students to have a voice and to share their concerns. Also, we also have home periods where students meet with their form teachers and get an opportunity to speak and share things that are affecting them. And hopefully, in speaking out, we may be able to get some of these bullying incidents or other matters that we can so treat with and address. So in that context, that is a level of support that we are hoping that cases that do not come forward officially, that students will be able to use these avenues as well.
So we are, the ministry, from what we are hearing, it's always in a reactionary phrase. But has there been an aggressive anti-bullying campaign in these schools taken on by the ministry? Public awareness, public services messages, announcements?
Yeah, so we would have launched our cultural transformation policy last year. And in that is a series of activities for students to be engaged in. One of it is No to Violence. And in No to Violence, it captures things that affect students, which would include bullying and other forms of indiscipline, and where students would be victims, and also seeing the external effects of our society at present, where we build in them that intrinsic value, and to have that peer support for each other, and to really see their school environment in one in which they want to have a safe environment and where they can really have a better coexistence with their colleagues and friends and minimize such incidents of bullying and other things that affect them on a daily basis.
And my last question, the 11 schools that you targeted with the program, Restorative Practitioner, how long do you think, what's the time frame to get the other 15 schools on board with that program?
Currently, these 11 schools, it's just 1 year, it's a preliminary results that we are able to give, and it's very positive based on what we are seeing with the implementation of this restorative practice. And the ministry will look at, once we have the resources, we can expand it to other schools.
But there's no time frame that...
but probably within the
Since
next...
you said that we heard that there has been some positive results, there must be a time frame to have the other 15 schools come on board as quickly as possible.
Sure, so I'll pass that on.
Through the chair, the global studies have shown that it takes about 2 years for us to see the progress and the performance of the program. So, as this was the first year of the implementation, the baseline data are going to be used as we track for the next 3 years, for the next 2 years. And then we will do an assessment of the program after the 2 years to see what, not challenges, but what adjustments we will have to make before we bring on the other 15 schools.
Then the obvious question arises, if you're not satisfied with the results, where do we go to then?
The program can be adjusted to the culture. So far, with the anecdotal data we've gathered, we are satisfied in the way that the program is going. We just have to learn and build on it as we go out. So I do see some hope for this program.
And I want to commend you for this program. I think it's a very good initiative, and I like the data-driven approach to the program. Let's welcome Member Beckles Robinson. Thank you, Member, for joining us. We move on to Member Mohit now.
Sure. So we're speaking restorative practices, and you have just mentioned that after 2 years, according to global practice, you assess the program, and then you would know where you're going from there and how it can be adjusted. But in your report, I see one of the major challenges is that of the lack of resources, the absence of materials such as electronic device, furniture, and other resources has really hindered the smooth execution and reporting of restorative practices. So what I would like is if you can elaborate on what aspect of the restorative practice requires electronic devices and furniture, and what are the other resources that are required to fully implement restorative practices at these schools mentioned.
Through the chair, the program uses a series of tools to bring the engagement of students. Devices such as, I don't want to say iPads, but things like the laptop or the touch screens will be welcomed. So it provides interaction for the students in terms of their feedback into a program or exploring a challenge, using the technology to explore challenges. We also have different materials that we would use, something called the talking pieces, the different types of social-emotional cards or materials that we would use to get students to voice how they feel, promoting emotional well-being and wellness. As I said, it's a new program, so we are now gathering these tools and getting our facilitators these different things so that they can really get the program moving as we would like to see it.
Have you reached out to the private sector for collaboration? I mean, the drawdown of the state for resources is always so tremendous and never enough. But I know, if I remember correctly, the ministry had success with partnering with the private sector to get laptops at one stage. Could this not be a program, because I think it's a really good program, that you could reach out to the private sector to supply the devices and or the furniture to facilitate the movement and the expansion of the program?
Yes, Mr. Chair, if I may. Yes, that avenue is there with regards to getting those support. As was mentioned earlier, the Adopt a School initiative is something that we have seen really progressing well in terms of getting support. In fact, we have a donation of 100 tablets that will be coming to the Ministry of Education very soon from United Nations. And what schools have been asked to do in terms of really pushing this initiative with the adopter school is to do a profile and to also indicate their areas of interest. And based on that and their needs, so we can reach out to our corporate citizens and private entities.
How many schools have been adopted so far?
We have approximately 60.
16?
60.
60, that's good. Across the 7 districts?
Yes, there have been in different districts. I don't have the names
and these
of the
are
schools.
Government schools or government
Combination of government
government
schools and denominational schools as well.
All right, thank you.
As it relates to the restorative program practices, in terms of the resources for that, the devices, furniture, etc., what is the status of that?
Okay.
Would the donation from United Nations, part of it be going towards this? How are we getting the resources to ensure that the pilot test is done properly so we can get fruitful results and determine whether the other schools can join, whether the program can continue or be disbanded?
Okay, so that 100 tablets, I cannot say it directly would go there. What I can tell you is recently we had distributed laptops to these 26 secondary schools, and in fact all secondary schools, to beef up their ICT requirements for doing ICT labs and so on. So therefore, the situation reported then and what is the situation now is that devices are in these schools, new devices that principals would have received recently. Furniture acquisition, that is currently taking place through procurement, and we are hoping that furniture, schools would have done their requisition for furniture, and that would be coming pretty soon because that is also undergoing the procurement procedure. Once we have that completed, we'll be able to, and laptops as well, for distribution to schools. So I hope by next term that schools will be able to get the requested furniture they require. So that will also be covered with regards to the 11 schools mentioned.
Thank you. Let's welcome Member Beckles-Robinson.
Thank you very much, Chair. So just on the issue of absenteeism and tardiness that was mentioned by both students as well as teachers, so can you tell us what would be the consequences for teachers who may not show up consistently to facilitate these interventions?
So as much as we monitor students' absenteeism, teacher absenteeism is something the ministry also look at very seriously. If teachers are persistently unpunctual or irregular, then there are steps to be taken through the progressive discipline, where the principal, based on looking at the attendance register, can so initiate with regards to teachers' absenteeism and treat with it accordingly. It can
from your records, is this a problem in the education sector, teacher absenteeism and or tardiness?
Regularity and punctuality has its effect. It is affecting some of our schools to the point where disciplinary action would have been initiated against some teachers because there are some teachers who would cross 4,000 minutes late for the year. And in doing so, steps will be taken and disciplinary action will be taken against teachers with that level of unpunctuality.
And what's the general level of absenteeism?
Teachers, currently, when we look at our data, teachers, in terms of their percentage of attendance, is approximately 85% in our primary and secondary schools.
That seems moderate. Yeah. Member Beckles, go ahead, please. Yes?
Okay, so that let us now look at the ministry's submission stated that at primary schools education level, school dropouts have increased by 108%, rising from 88 students in 2021-2022 academic year to 183 students in 2022-2023. So that, if I can ask, was the ministry able to ascertain the reason for the increase in dropouts? And if I would just, I mean, it's a few questions, but just in the interest of time, could you tell us whether you looked at it by districts, which we have reported the highest? Could you also clarify, does this figure include students leaving the public education system and entering alternative education institutions, such as private schools? And then the last one, does the approach and implementation of intervention strategies to address school dropouts vary between the primary school and the secondary school?
Okay, at the dropouts data that we have it by numbers and, right, so, yes, so, and we have it by gender as well, but I don't think we have it broken down by districts. It's not that we cannot provide that data. I don't think we have it here at this point in time. Some of the dropouts in the primary school, from since COVID to now, we would have seen some parents opting to do homeschooling. And we don't know if some of these numbers would have also included parents who are doing homeschooling or choose that option against having their children in our public school system. Can't you just give us the next? Yes, it's in our document on page 29. And we have the primary school on table 2. And table 2 will look at both the dropouts, the rate, and it'll give you it in gender. So in 2021-2022, the male was 68 and female 22. In 2021 to 2022, 47 male and 41 female, giving us a total of 88. And of course, in 2023, 111 male and 72 female students, giving us 183.
Yeah, in both tables, I noticed that there is a difference. There are more boys in all instances. So have you, I mean, are you doing any analysis as it relates to that?
Yes, we are looking into it in terms of why it is that we have a higher number of male students. One of the things that could be an issue there is that depending on their home environment and circumstances relating to that, it could have the male students not being able to attend school. Some of it will be taken up by referrals, where we can assist the home environment to get some of these students back out. But at the secondary level, we're also seeing quite a large number as well in terms of the male students.
Well, if I could just intervene, for the public looking on, I mean, the main issue related to school dropout is at the secondary school level. Clearly,
yes.
With 20 to 21, 536, 21 to 22, 614, and 22 to 23, 503 students dropping out. How much of this is as a result of the attainment of the mandatory age of, is it 16? 5 to 16 to attend school?
16 years compulsory school age.
And students who attain that age sometimes don't, it's not mandatory legally for them to attend school. So that may be contributing to the higher rates of dropout at the secondary school level. Is that a factor? And have you been able to track, is there any attempt to track these students to see where they end up in the system, or are they going to vocational training or any other option that may be available to them?
Yes, I would agree that it is a factor. I don't think we are able to actually follow up with every single student when they exit the system exactly where they are, unless the parent give us something in writing saying that they are taking out their child to pursue some other avenue. In some cases, they also seek guidance because they realize the level of, or that for some reason their child may not have an interest in the academic work at that point in time, but may opt to do a skilled trade, and so may indicate to the school we would have an idea. But in some cases, we may not be able to get that information.
But I'm sure the ministry has access to the students' performance levels before they drop out.
Yes.
And analysis can be done through that to see a major factor may be the student has cognitively zoned out because they have not been performing and they don't feel they need to continue because they've detached from the system. Has the ministry done that kind of analysis? Because I think that kind of analysis is very important to see if that is a major contributor. I mean, we can't have data and not be using the data to find out the origin or the causes of the issue. Has that been done?
I don't think we really would have gone into that extent, but what we have been doing recently is to get more into being proactive, looking at chronic absenteeism of students, and try to address that before they become dropouts.
Well, why I have an issue with that, I understand that approach, because there's a difference between actual dropping out, not attending school, and attending school and intellectually and cognitively dropping out. So you're just going to school, but you ain't really doing nothing. You understand? And that also has to be looked at, because that can lead to the eventual physical dropping out. So I don't understand why the analysis is not being done. Because when you look at the performance levels, particularly at the secondary school level, you see a drop-off in performance as has been identified before.
I can follow up, and it goes back to the issue of the districts. So are you saying that you don't have the data by districts?
Yes, we have the data by districts, but we would not have it. We did not have it here.
Oh, you don't have it here?
Yeah.
Because I just wanted to...
We can't provide it at nearby districts.
I mean, I always like to think, well...
To know exactly which district.
Yes, because, I mean, as a member of parliament for some rural constituencies, like, well, Blanchisseuse and so on, then even other areas like Monlacqua and so, right? Where there's a relationship between issues of transportation and other things, right? You know, you find that they drop out of school very early. So it's how do we use, or even like Kaitawaripo, and then you look at the performance of those schools at primary and secondary level, and you ask yourself, is there some relationship between, you know, what we are talking about, so in order to help to make some different policies for those areas?
Chair, if I may, with regard to dropout, at the level of the school, the principal is charged with that responsibility of monitoring the attendance, and if a child suddenly drops out, the principal has that responsibility to try to contact that parent to find out what is happening. Now, the dropout data that you see there is a dropout from public school. Okay? So it doesn't mean that that large number of these children are off on the street somewhere doing nothing. Okay? Principals are supposed to reach out to the parents to find out what is happening with the child. So sometimes you would have a child who, as you just said, Chair, they are of the age of 16. They do not have to be in school. They prefer to work with their father under in the plumbing shop or what have you not. So you would have those factors at play in that dropout information. The principal is charged with responsibility of finding out, okay? And he would have that in his school records, okay? Not all the time would the principal have the information. However, sometimes it is not forthcoming with the parent. You try to tell the parent, bring in, if your child is at, going to a private school instead or whatnot, bring in the information. So they will have what they got, but not all the time the parents will abide. Now, if the child is of compulsory school age, okay, and we are not getting information from the parent that that child is being homeschooled or that child is in a private school, those children are referred, and that is where SSSD will get involved to see what is happening with those children. But I just want us to bear in mind that the data we are seeing is not necessarily true dropouts in a sense. It's dropout from public secondary school system. Some of them may be in private schools. Some of them may be homeschooled, okay? And some of them, yes, are really not accounted for, all right? And those we do refer to SSSD. Thank you, Chair.
Beckles, that's it? Thank you, Member Mohit. Go ahead, please. 14.
Asked and answered.
Oh, the second one. Okay, my bad. Member Monroe, 15.
The Ministry of Education stated that the identification of truant students is relatively effective. Considering the steps mentioned to identify and follow up with truant students, in what ways do you believe the tracking system of that can be improved?
In terms of truancy?
Pardon?
In terms of truancy, that's...
Of truancy, yes.
Yes.
About the truants, how can you improve the system to track and regulate, monitor?
Okay. So, at both the primary and secondary school levels, okay, as I mentioned a little earlier, we engage principals to provide on a termly basis students with high absenteeism. And that is where we use that data to engage in one of the initiatives where they have meeting with parents to follow up with their absenteeism and to see what support system may be needed at the home level to in some way get these absenteeism at a lower level or get students back out to school. But very early in terms of managing absenteeism, we look at it from our daily report where schools are required to do their attendance registers for both morning and afternoons to ensure that students are accounted for. If students are absent for at least 2 to 3 days and we don't get a medical from the parents as to why the child is not in school, then we do a follow-up by calling the parent, the class teacher or form teacher, and follow up with the parent to find out why the student or the child is not in school. And if the absenteeism continues and there's no medical report, then we also refer that to the Student Support Services Division, where the school social worker will visit to find out why this particular student is not attending school. So we have all these steps that we do follow, and we also build to the point where we get this chronic absenteeism of students, and we want to ensure that students identified, both at the primary and secondary level, that we can address it by the principal engaging with the parents and the presence of the school social worker to find out what is happening and how we can get these students back into normal school attendance. Based on what we have been doing, in 2023 we would have had chronic absenteeism of 5,995 students, that's both primary and secondary. And because of what we have been doing so far, in the same, this year, the number would have dropped to 3,920. Still pretty high, but we would have seen a reduction. So we are seeing the rewards of what we have been implementing so far and really tracking students name by name with regards to chronic absenteeism.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the ministry's submission as it relates to student support services and its intervention into cases based on the referral submission and the case review and assignment, usually the Student Support Services Division, based on your submission, personnel at the school must submit truancy referrals to their respective multidisciplinary team, the MDT, within 5 days of receiving the report, pending the submission of all supporting documentation. And your case and review assignment says in your submission that the multidisciplinary team is required to review the referral and assign each case for intervention within 14 days of receipt. That's based on your submission. What you are saying in your submission is that this process ensures a timely response to cases such as these, allowing for appropriate interventions to be implemented without significant delays. What we want from you is for you to tell us whether these time frames for interventions are generally met, and if not, what challenges does the Student Support Services Division face in meeting with these time frames, and what are the general delays faced by the SSSD when trying to intervene?
Chair, if you may. So once the case has reached the MDT, and that's the multidisciplinary team of the Student Support Services, which is made up of our DAIU, which is our unit with our psychologist, our school social workers, our guidance officers, our special ed team. These persons would then assess the case to see which unit will get the particular case at that time. This team meets every week, and a number of cases is brought to the team every week, and they try to meet and assess those cases and identify the units that the case is going to go through every week. The challenges can be, one, documentation, as I said before. Sometimes cases are brought without significant documentation, so it just might be an overview of what it is. We may need things like not the referral form, but supporting medical documents, or it may need other functional assessment documents for us to really start a process, which will delay in terms of how we move forward. We try to address cases, but caseloads are also one of the delays, because depending on the school, the caseload may be very high in certain districts. So those are the things that may prevent us the smooth running of that process.
Can I ask you what's the average time frame for addressing immediate cases, and also what is the average time for addressing less immediate cases?
Immediate cases would be considered critical intervention. And as it says critical intervention, we act on that one time. So once we have an officer on the ground, the officer starts the processing of the case, even if we may not have all of the documentation, because it's a critical incident. The other, if it's not a critical incident, we would go through the process of once we get all the information, within the 14 days, we try to start the interventions. So there may be times where we may not have all the documentation, but because of the need, because each case is unique, we will start the different intervention, be it a functional assessment, or it may be group guidance because of the particular issue we need to address, where we may have to speak with the class for a group guidance session, or we may have to pull out small group sessions to treat with it before we even move to individual counseling or home visits if it's under social work. So we try to address the cases in a timely manner.
Can I ask you how many cases you have before you at this point in time?
Sure. So the data I have is the number of referrals received by district between the September 2022 to August 2023. We have 3,990 referred cases in the primary level and 6,890 cases at the secondary level.
This includes all education districts,
All 7 educational districts.
so not just the schools of focus.
No.
With the staff that you have, that seems a strain. Seems very onerous. We'll go to Member Robinson for the final question in this objective, and then we move on to objective 3. Member Robinson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the ministry's submission noted that the Ministry of National Security ensures student safety, particularly in hotspot areas. Ministry of National Security's role is to ensure student safety, especially in hotspots, areas where crime and gang activity may affect school attendance. So could you tell us the ways in which the Ministry of National Security ensures student safety?
Yeah. Chair, if I may. So that partnership is one in which the Ministry of Education has over a period of time now. So in terms of schools in hotspots areas, patrolling, very important, and we have that happening. We would have provided the Ministry of National Security a list of schools that we see the need for having these regular patrolling. So that is something that the Ministry of National Security is doing. The community policing also very important as well. And visits to schools, that is also scheduled, where they come in and they have lectures with students, especially some of our at-risk students, and she would share information related to drugs and other things that students who would find themselves engaging from time to time to educate them on, and also to have motivational sessions with students as well, and to invite them to join clubs like the Police Youth Club and other avenues where some of these students who share an interest or will be able to benefit from in terms of their own rehabilitation program. So we do get that level of support.
I don't know I don't know what is described as a hotspot area in these times, because I know hotspot areas have changed location over the years in this country. So I don't know, is there a particular designation, or do you work with the police in identifying these areas in specific school districts?
Well, it's a combination of that and also principals based on situations that are happening right outside their school environment would allow for that terminology to be used, and where the need for having the presence of the police.
I don't want to stereotype schools or districts, but how many districts are involved in this?
It's across all educational districts.
Across all?
Yes.
So it's hotspots in all the 7 districts?
Yes.
That's very frightening.
Yeah, and we would have submitted that list to the Ministry of National Security for having these additional support.
So these are reports from principals?
Reports from principals, and based on certain things that would have happened recently in some school areas. Sometimes you have shooting incidents outside the vicinity of the school area, but very close, where it would traumatize both teachers and students. So in addition to that, we also have what we are doing as well with selected schools, the active shooter program, where we are bomb threat, to ensure that certain procedures are adhered to and followed, so that if these things do arise, how we treat and address it.
Because of do specific schools have police officers placed on a regular basis outside the school or inside the school because of the reports?
Yeah. Well, we do have our MTS staff inside the school, so we don't have a need for a police officer in the school compound. And I know because of the heavy demands of we have safety officers as well in our schools, the government secondary schools. But the policing at the outside, based on their availability and the hours that they are needed, that they can so assist with patrolling. And the main time would be, one of the key time would be in the afternoon when school dismisses and students exit. Sometimes it's because two schools nearby, and they can interact, students can interact, and that itself could also little issues between students as well.
And before I move to Member Naked, and how much emphasis is placed because of recent police reports of 9 and 11 and 14-year-olds in gangs, some instances in schools, is placed on the infiltration of gangs in schools. Are you getting reports of that? How are you dealing with that as the Education Ministry? Some students who are reportedly as young as 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, in gangs and in schools, in some instances, extorting their peers or attempting to extort their peers.
Again, we depend on the Ministry of National Security police officers to provide that for us. We do not get too involved at that level, but once it comes to us through the police service, then we can look at it in regards to the school environment and what we can do to...
Have you received reports like that?
I can't say officially that we have any reports of gangs in our school system. We don't have any of such. But sometimes when things do happen on the outside, it is alleged that this student is involved, but we don't actually, I don't have really conclusive information on that.
So what happens, because I know of a situation in a school in Port Esprit, I will not call the name of the school, where a teacher was told by a student, don't tell me nothing. My father is a gang member and you'll get mashed up. What happens in a case like that? The teacher just took leave immediately because he did not want to be put at risk.
Well, in such cases, we, principal, would advise the teacher or such persons to report it to the police. And of course, we leave it in the hands of the police to take it from there because of the sensitive nature of it and in terms of safety aspect.
Thank you. Member Naked.
Thank you, Chair. You spoke about the mental health programs, school-wide mental health programs, and how it was aimed at trying to get away from the stigma of what is mental health and so. Can you provide us with some more details concerning these mental health initiatives?
Through the chair. The Student Support Services Division provides psychosocial support to our students who have been afflicted with trauma. So our Developmental Assessment Intervention Unit, this is the unit that hosts our clinical psychologists, our behavior psychologists, and our school psychologists. They provide that type of support. So you will have programs also run by our school social workers. So we recently had a program called Safe Communities, Safe Schools under the Cultural Transformation Policy, the Note of Violence, and where we will engage students in group sessions, individual sessions, different projects related to building their awareness, building their capacity, helping with coping and resiliency skills. Our guidance unit does, they would provide that type of support through the group guidance in the classroom. They will do the whole school or universal program. So we have both targeted interventions and we have the universal interventions provided by the different supporting units of the SSSD. Our restorative practitioners and facilitators, they would ensure that the circles that they conduct, they will get a lot of rich data about what is happening to the students and how does the trauma really affect them, their peers, or even their communities. So these programs help to support that trauma.
Just last quick question. How many clinical psychologists you have operating in the schools? And specifically geared towards children under the age of 12.
Under the age of 12.
Don't be that specific. How many clinical psychologists you have?
At our in our DAIU unit, we have currently 13 clinical psychologists.
Oh.
And those persons are put in districts. So they work within the district. So in the DIU team, in the district, you will have a team of, you will have school psychologists, clinical psychologists and behavioral psychologists. And that team is placed in a district. So if a school is in need of that type of support, they work as a team to address the different issues. They are our last resource in terms of we would have gone through guidance or classroom guidance, we would have gone through the school social worker, and if we recognize that the problem still persists, we then refer to the DAIU unit, who will do psycho-educational assessments on the child, and if need be, even may refer outside or to external agencies, like, for example, child guidance, for that support if we recognize that medication may be a need.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I'm going to allow one quick question from each of the other members, starting with Member Mohit, then Member Monroe, and Member Robinson, and we thank you for your patience in facilitating our interrogation this morning into afternoon. Member Mohit.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Ramratan, you spoke about the interventions at the school and schools and the MTS officers being in the school.
25.
So, you know, you don't really need the police at that level. But I can remember that there was a unit called the Community Policing Unit. And in schools of interest, at-risk schools in particular, these units will work with the Student Support Services Division and the principal as well as the teachers to ensure that these students, you really intervene and you get to the bottom of the issue. And in that way, you have that intervention which is inclusive. And these students, you see that they become better in the school system. Nobody is going to really be afraid of an MTS officer. Let's be realistic. So in terms of the gang issues, which you do not have reported officially according to what you have given to us here today, you still depend on the police service. But the Community Policing Unit, what has become of that in terms of working with your school district supervisors, etc., and your Student Support Services Division in really dealing with absenteeism, dropouts, etc., gang violence in the schools? What has become of this unit in working with your ministry?
Chair, if I may. So, yes, that collaboration continues to exist with community police, with student support services and the schools. The visits are allowed as frequent as the community police would like to visit schools, and based on certain scenarios and in communication with the school principals, they would look at how much time they will have to visit and probably meet with the principal or have sessions with particular teachers or the deans or the teaching staff, as the case may be, to look at what is happening and to address certain issues and concerns. So that is there. So I'm not saying because of the safety officers that we have and our complement of security officers that we don't utilize the community police. We do have that collaboration. And yes, it also extends at the level of the district, where school supervisors would attend meetings with the Ministry of National Security and the community policing to look at district initiatives as well, what can be done, and certain schools that they can probably monitor a little more closely, depending on certain activities or certain reports or information that they would have.
Okay.
Member Monroe.
Thank you, Chairman. Final question to the panel. Your submission indicated that SSD was able to provide more targeted training and workshop on educational support and parenting skills to parents and teachers and whatnot, and to maintain and strengthen the school and home partnership. How often these workshops on educational support and parenting skills are provided, and how many was conducted between 2023 to 24?
Chair, if I may. The parenting in education program should be conducted at least once a month in the schools. and it all depends on availability. So we have the virtually, and we also do in person. There are times where we cannot do it in the school per se because of the environment and parents not feeling safe. So we may even go out somewhere else where the parents can meet. For example, a library. In one district, we use the local library to have those sessions. So the sessions really help parents to understand the value of education and how to cope. The number, I don't have that information with me. I apologize for that. But we are targeting at least once a month to meet with parents. And of course, we also have parent information sessions done by our guidance officers and in collaboration with teachers. So they would be at the PTA meetings and they would give that type of supportive information depending on what is the need at the time.
Member Robinson-Beckles.
Yeah, just very quickly, as it relates to the information you gave about the criteria to prioritize in cases of SSD, so could you give us an idea as to the average time frame when you address immediate cases, and then, well, less immediate cases, just an idea?
Critical, through the chair, critical incident cases are addressed immediately, even if we may not have the full package of referrals or documentation to support the referral. We do that immediately once there is an officer on site. If there is no officer on site, if in the case of a school that is not a school of focus, an officer will be deployed to assist, and a regular referral will go through the period of 14 days through the MDT.
And can I just ask a question? Have you seen any increases as it relates to mental health and so since COVID?
We have observed changes in behaviors, yes, as COVID has affected both the adult and the child population. So in terms of, for example, communication skills, conflict resolution skills, we have seen changes, and this is why the Ministry of Education moved to put on programs and personnel to try to support students who are not coping with such skills.
Thank you. At this time, we'd like to thank the officials of the Ministry of Education for being with us today and their patience in answering our questions, including the Acting Permanent Secretary, the Chief Education Officer, the Director of School Supervision, the Director of Curriculum Planning and Development Division, the Director of Education Research and Evaluation Acting, and the Manager of Student Support Services Division. I'd like to ask the Acting CEO, Chief Education Officer, if he has any closing comments.
I just want to thank this committee for this opportunity for having this session with the Ministry of Education. We appreciate your questions and some of the way you brought some of the things to us in a very frank way. We appreciate that because we are not afraid of the challenges, and we really want to ensure that all our students can really benefit from our education system. We would have all passed through that education system, and we are here today, and we want to ensure that every single student, that we can improve the quality of their lives, because we all will have to depend on them in the future. They are our future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. May I just add to that the extreme focus you should be placing on vulnerable groups, because that is where the real gap is in Trinidad and Tobago. Those students who may fall prey to gangs and other nefarious elements in society without the intervention of an effective education system. While there are positives we have to acknowledge, and we've identified those, we need to focus on those who may not be performing or underperforming, and consistently so, and those districts that need intervention. So thank you once again for being with us. We'd also like to thank the listening and viewing audience and members of the committee who have been here today, and those who could not be here, all stakeholders, committee members for their continued support and participation, the invaluable support of the Office of the Parliament for your procedural and logistical support, and again, the viewing and listening audience. May I take the opportunity, I think this is our last live session before the end of the year, to wish you all season's greetings, Merry Christmas, and a safe, bright, and prosperous 2025, and hope to see you next year with some even better news. Thank you all for viewing and listening, and the meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.